Her smile told me I wasn't supposed to survive. It was the kind of smile a woman wears when she believes the ending has already been written. Mine in this case, and she's simply stopping by to enjoy the view. Don't skip this one. The first line will pull you in, but the truth behind it will stay with you. Settle in, take a breath, and let this story unfold. The clock on the hospital wall read 7:42 p.m., its second hand ticking loud enough to irritate me, even through the ache spreading beneath the 17 marks on my arms. The hallway lights flickered like they always did at shift change, just a small electrical quiver. But tonight the flicker felt like a warning. Or maybe that was just my age talking. At 68, I've learned to trust the whispers in a room more than the noise. But nothing whispered louder than Theresa's shoes clicking against the floor as she walked in, heels too sharp for a hospital corridor. She stopped at the foot of my bed, her smile stretching just a fraction too slow, like she'd practiced it. "You look better," she said, though her eyes traveled over the marks with the satisfaction of someone checking off a chore. I didn't flinch. That surprised her. I had learned a long time ago that showing fear to a woman like Theresa is like giving her sugar. She feeds off it. So instead I adjusted my pillow, pretending she was just another visitor with poor timing. "That's kind of you to notice," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. My throat still burned from the dryness the medication caused, but I didn't let it show. At 68, dignity becomes its own kind of armor. Her smile tightened. She wasn't here to offer comfort. She wasn't here to check on my recovery either. The way she studied the lines on my arms, raised, red, shaped like symbols I couldn't yet understand, told me she was waiting for something. Maybe for me to tremble. Maybe for the marks to spread again. Maybe for me to stop breathing. But I wasn't planning to do any of those things. Not yet. The monitor beside me beeped steadily, the only sound in that tense little space, until a distant cart rattled somewhere down the hall. I watched her eyes dart toward the doorway before settling back on me, as if she didn't want anyone to know she was here. And that was my first clue. A guilty woman always looks over her shoulder. A woman hiding something always positions herself near the exit. And a woman who comes to the hospital at 7:42 p.m. wearing perfume strong enough to mask stress is a woman who believes she won't have to do it again. He thought this was goodbye. I folded my hands over the blanket, covering the ugliest of the marks even though the fabric irritated them. The pain made my eyes water, but I blinked it away. "You came alone," I said. "That's unlike you." She tilted her head, pretending to be amused. "Should I have brought flowers? Balloons? A preacher? Bring whatever lets you sleep at night." Her smile faltered, just a hairline crack, but I saw it. I always see the small things. Age teaches you that the truth rarely walks in wearing a bright sign. It hides in half expressions, in how someone inhales before lying, in the way their fingers twitch when they're cornered. Her fingers twitched now. Another clue. She stepped closer to the bed, pretending to reach for the water pitcher on my tray, though she was nowhere near thirsty. She just wanted to hover over me, to look down at me the same way she always had, as if she was the polished one and I was the burden she had learned to tolerate. But I wasn't her burden. Not anymore. As she poured, I watched the way her hand shook. Barely, but enough. Her bracelets jingled too loudly for such a small movement. She set the pitcher down quickly, almost nervously, then tucked her hair behind one ear, trying to recover her composure. "There's no need to stare," she said lightly, but her voice had a thin crack running through it. "Then don't give me reasons," I replied. For a moment the room settled into an uneasy quiet. The kind where two women, both too old and too tired to pretend anymore, try to read each other like worn-out books. The soft hum of the fluorescent light buzzed above us, flickering again as if reacting to our tension. I shifted my weight, ignoring the pain shooting down my side. My bones had never felt heavier, my skin never more foreign. But my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in days. Theresa's eyes locked on the notebook resting beside my pillow. A simple brown spiral notebook I kept for crossword puzzles. Or at least that's what I told the nurses. She didn't know what was inside yet, but she suspected. She always did have a sense for danger. "You're writing again?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I jot things down." "What kind of things?" "The kind you don't want me to forget." Her jaw tightened so sharply I heard her teeth click. She reached for my blanket, smoothing it like she used to when she wanted to distract from something she'd said. But I saw her wrist then, and the faintest trace of a mark beneath her sleeve. It flashed only for a second. But it was there. A small, dark line. A twin to my own. That was my hidden advantage. She didn't know I'd seen it. She didn't know I had spent the last 24 hours watching more closely than I let on. She didn't know the old woman's warning was beginning to make sense in ways I hadn't expected. But most importantly, she didn't know I was no longer afraid of her. "I don't understand why you're behaving like this," she said, her tone switching to wounded innocence, the role she always played best. "I came here to check on you." "No," I said softly. "You came here to see if it worked." Those words froze her. For the first time since she walked in, her smile completely vanished. Not faded, vanished. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She looked at the doorway again, this time longer, eyes widening just a touch. Another clue. She hadn't expected me to say that. She certainly hadn't expected me to say it calmly. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. Didn't cry. Women like her expect tears. They never expect composure. And the older I get, the more dangerous my calm becomes. "What exactly do you think I did?" she finally whispered, clasping her purse as if gripping a lifeline. "You can tell me," I murmured. "Or you can tell the nurse when she asks why you keep visiting so late." Her face drained of color. Just a little, but enough for me to savor. He took a step back. The sound of her heel against the tile echoed sharply. The clock ticked louder. Even the air felt colder between us. Then she looked at my arms again. The marks had darkened since she entered the room, as if reacting to her presence. He saw that. She swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked to the notebook again, and I smiled. Not the polite smile women my age are expected to use. No. A smile sharp enough to cut through her confidence. A smile that told her I wasn't finished. She steadied herself and said, "You're imagining things." "Maybe," I said. "But funny thing about imagination, it usually starts with reality." She gripped the foot of my bed, leaning in so close I smelled that familiar scent again, the one from the boutique my son insisted never existed. Lavender mixed with something metallic, faint but unmistakable. That same unsettling scent clung to her jacket, her purse, even her hair. That was the final clue I needed. She inhaled sharply, ready to snap, ready to retake control of the conversation, but I interrupted her before she even got a word out. "Theresa," I whispered, "why are you really here?" Her eyes widened. Her grip tightened. Her voice lowered. "You tell me." For a moment neither of us breathed. The hallway went silent. The clock ticked once, loud enough to break the spell. Her shadow stretched across my blanket. And then, the door behind her began to open. I lifted my chin, meeting her stare head-on. "Let's see," I said quietly, "who you're afraid of more. Me or them. And that's exactly where it ends." The door opening behind Theresa pulled her attention away from me, but I didn't look to see who entered. I kept my eyes on her, watching the way her shoulders tensed, the way her fingers tightened around the foot of my bed, the way her breath caught for just a second before she masked it. Whoever stood behind her didn't matter yet. What mattered was that her fear had finally shown itself. And once fear appears, it never fully disappears. It only looks for a new place to hide. But the nurse who stepped in, pushing a tray of evening medications, had no idea she'd walked straight into a storm. "Evening, ladies," she chirped gently, the kind of gentle that comes from too many years on night shifts. She handed me a small paper cup with a pill and turned to adjust the blinds. Theresa used that moment to slip toward the door, mumbling something about needing to make a phone call. She didn't look at me as she left. And that was answer enough. I didn't swallow the pill until she was gone. When I did, it scraped slightly against my throat, irritating the dryness that had settled there since morning. The nurse offered me water and I sipped slowly, letting the coolness settle the rising heat inside me. The marks on my arms pulsed faintly under the fluorescent lights, like quiet heartbeats of their own. When the nurse left, closing the door softly behind her, the room felt bigger than before, quieter, calmer, but somehow heavier. I eased myself back against the pillow, adjusting the thin blanket over my legs. The fabric scraped against the raised lines on my skin, and I winced, though the pain didn't feel as frightening as it had 2 days ago. It was still sharp, but it carried a familiarity now, as if the marks were trying to speak to me in a language my body hadn't learned yet. I laid my hand lightly on my left arm, tracing the edge of one of the lines with the tip of my finger. The skin around it warmed instantly, a kind of heat that made the hair on my neck rise. It wasn't just pain. It was something else, something like recognition. The moment Theresa left the room, the marks had shifted. Not visually, not in a way anyone else would have noticed, but I felt it. They tightened. They pulsed. They changed. They reacted to her. And now with her gone, they felt expectant. Waiting. I reached for the brown notebook beside my pillow. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. I'd spent the past few days pretending to sleep more than I actually did. At my age, a single night of restlessness felt like 3. But I forced myself awake, flipping to the page where I had sketched the first symbol I noticed. A curved line. Then a notch. Then another line overlapping it. Simple shapes. Unfamiliar meanings. At first, I thought the shapes were just rashes forming patterns the way bruises sometimes do. But no bruise had ever burned like these. No allergic reaction had ever brought flashes of images behind my eyes the way these lines had. The first time it happened, I had been alone, lying on my side trying to ease the ache in my hips. I closed my eyes for only a moment, and suddenly I saw a young woman's face. Sharp cheekbones, brown hair pulled back, a small birthmark near her jaw. The vision was brief, only a second or two, but when I opened my eyes, the mark on my arm had completed a new segment. That same woman had appeared again the next night. And the night after that. Tonight, however, the image came without warning. As soon as I traced the edge of the newest line, the room shifted around me, not physically but in my mind. A swirl of colors blurred, sharpening into a dimly lit hallway. A wooden floor. A broken light fixture hanging by a wire. And the same brown-haired woman standing in a doorway, looking back over her shoulder before fading away like dust carried by a breeze. When the image dissolved, I gasped, clutching the bed rails with a strength I didn't know I still had. The room returned. The monitor beeped steadily. The hallway murmured faintly with nurses' voices. A cleaning cart rolled somewhere in the distance. But the woman's face lingered in my mind. And this time she wasn't alone. 2 more faces flashed, quickly, painfully, one after another. Both women. Both strangers. Both frightened. I pressed the heel of my hand against my forehead and exhaled slowly, trying to ground myself. My legs trembled under the blanket. My breathing felt shallow. The image had taken something out of me this time. More energy, more clarity, more of whatever held me steady. I wasn't imagining it. The marks weren't random. They were showing me something. Something about Theresa. Something about the women I kept seeing. Something I wasn't meant to understand yet. I closed the notebook and set it on the tray, pulling my blanket up. I felt suddenly cold, though the room hadn't changed temperature. A deep chill settled along my spine, the kind that makes a woman my age rub her arms for comfort. But comfort didn't come. A soft knock at the door jolted me. "Still awake?" a quiet voice asked. It was the younger nurse, the one with the warm eyes and the habit of checking on patients even after her shift technically ended. She stepped inside, holding a warm blanket fresh from the heater. The scent of clean cotton floated through the air. "I thought you might need this," she said. "Thank you," I whispered, trying to steady my breathing. She draped the blanket over me and paused, looking at the marks. Her brows knitted together gently. "Has anyone figured out what those are?" I hesitated. "They said it might be a reaction." She looked unconvinced. Not in a suspicious way. More in a worried, thoughtful way. Reactions don't usually come in patterns. Patterns. There it was, a small validation I didn't expect. She left soon after, giving me a reassuring smile, but I noticed she glanced down the hallway before the door closed. A small thing. But small things matter. Alone again, I placed both hands on my arms, palms flat against the warm blanket. I whispered to myself, "Show me more if you need to." I didn't expect anything to happen. Not immediately. But the marks warmed under my palms slowly, like embers being coaxed back to life. The warmth spread up toward my shoulders, pushing away the chill lodged in my bones. I closed my eyes not because I was scared but because I was preparing. Another image came. Not a hallway this time. A kitchen. Old-fashioned. Checkerboard floor. A radio playing soft music in the background. A woman's silhouette moved near the sink. Her hands trembled as she washed something. Cloth? A garment? No, a dress. The same dress. My breath caught. Then the silhouette snapped toward me as if hearing something behind her. and the image vanished. I opened my eyes, heart pounding. My throat tightened with a sudden swell of emotion, not terror but recognition. A sense that the marks were not hurting me. They were helping me. Showing me women who had touched the same dress. Showing me pieces of their lives. Showing me their fear. And showing me that Theresa was linked to every one of them. I leaned back, exhausted but sharper than before. I lifted the notebook again and sketched the new image. The lines on my arms pulsed softly in approval. Or maybe that was just my imagination. At my age, knowing the difference becomes harder. But one thing was clear. The marks weren't killing me. They were guiding me. They were revealing a past tied to Theresa. A past she hoped never to see again. A past filled with women whose faces she expected the world to forget. And tonight, without meaning to, she helped me understand something else. Whatever this curse was, it responded to her fear. If the marks reacted to her presence, then they recognized her. If they recognized her, then she had touched what I touched. And if she had touched it, then she wasn't just a visitor. She was part of the story. My skin tingled again and one final image flickered, brief but strong enough to make my breath shake. A hand. Her hand. Holding the dress. I closed the notebook slowly, my fingers trembling around the cover. The marks weren't showing me my fate. They were showing me hers. And I wasn't done watching. Though my eyes burned from exhaustion and my hands trembled from holding that notebook for so long. The realization that the marks were showing me her past, not mine, sat heavy in my chest like a weight I couldn't shift. I rested the notebook on my lap and stared at the newest sketch, a hand holding the dress. Her hand. I didn't need to write her name beside it. My bones already knew the truth. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady the fluttering beneath my ribs. My heart wasn't racing out of fear anymore. It was racing because I finally had something resembling direction. Something more than pain and confusion and half-formed images. But direction doesn't mean clarity. Not at my age. It means work. Careful, patient work. The kind I hadn't done in decades but felt suddenly capable of again. The room around me settled into the soft hum of nighttime hospital life. Carts rolling, monitors beeping, slippers shuffling past my doorway. Nothing out of place. Nothing alarming. But after everything I'd felt and seen, the normal quiet only made the unease sharper. It's strange how silence amplifies the things you don't understand. My skin prickled under the warm blanket the nurse had given me. The marks felt calmer now, almost resting. But I didn't fool myself. They were waiting for my next move. I pressed my palm lightly to the notebook, grounding myself in the physical world before I lost myself again in thoughts. I needed to follow the women. The ones the marks had shown me. The ones Theresa thought time had erased. I shifted slowly, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. The cold tile floor bit into my bare feet, sending a quick jolt up my bones. At 68, every movement needs a moment of negotiation. The moment stretched as I steadied myself with both hands gripping the bed rails. My joints protested, but not as sharply as they used to. Fear weakens the body. Purpose strengthens it. Tonight, purpose won. I reached for the small light on the table, switching it on with a soft click. The glow was warm, spreading across the notebook in my hands. I could see the age spots, the faint tremor in my fingers, the thinning skin. But I also saw determination. An old, familiar kind that I used to have before life convinced me to soften. I flipped to the pages where I'd written notes about the first woman. I had only a few fragments. Brown hair, birthmark near her jaw, a hallway, fear in her eyes. No names. No dates. No context. But women like her don't disappear completely. Not from the world. And not from other women who pay attention. A small idea surfaced. A memory, really, of a local newspaper article I'd seen months ago in the waiting room of my primary doctor. Something about a woman whose family had never stopped searching. A woman whose features weren't far from the ones etched in my mind. I rubbed my temple, trying to recall the details. My memory, though slower than it used to be, was still reliable when it mattered. I stood carefully, leaning on the rolling tray for balance. The hallway looked empty as I stepped out, the scent of strong disinfectant sweeping over me. It reminded me of childhood. Strange how that smell never changed over the decades. Hospitals always felt suspended in time, untouched by trends or generations. I walked toward the small family lounge at the end of the corridor. My slippers whispered along the floor. A nurse glanced at me from behind her computer but didn't stop me. Older women wandering at night isn't unusual here. We look like we're searching for sleep. And maybe we are, just not the kind anyone can provide. Inside the lounge, the overhead lights were dimmed, leaving only the glow of a muted television and the faint hum of a vending machine. On the far wall sat a stack of newspapers and community newsletters. Exactly what I needed. I sank into the armchair beside the stack, catching my breath as I reached for the papers. The first few pages were irrelevant. Sports, local politics, recipes. But halfway through an older issue my heart jolted. A missing person notice. A woman with brown hair. A birthmark near her jaw. It was her. The caption below the picture mentioned she had been missing for nearly a decade. The article spoke of families still leaving porch lights on, still hoping. My hand tightened around the page. The marks on my arm pulsed faintly beneath my sleeve, reacting to the photograph as if recognizing her. I whispered a quiet apology to the woman in the photo. She couldn't hear me, but women like us often speak to the lost anyway. It makes the world feel less cruel. As I read further, something else caught my attention. A mention of a dress shop she visited the day before she vanished. A tiny boutique tucked between two older buildings downtown. The article said the store closed shortly after she disappeared, claiming rent issues. But the wording struck me. The store closed too suddenly. Too suddenly often means something else. My fingers trembled as I folded the paper onto my lap. I stared at the woman's face until my eyes burned. Then I reached for another paper from the stack. A second woman. Different features. Different year. But the same pattern. A brief mention of her stopping by a small shop to pick up a unique dress she'd been excited about. My breath slowed. My hands steadied. The pattern was unmistakable now. Each woman had vanished within days of visiting a boutique. The boutique my son insisted never existed. The boutique whose scent lingered on Theresa's clothing. A soft ringing noise broke my concentration, the vending machine resetting itself. It startled me only slightly, but enough for my heart to skip a beat. I closed my eyes, listening for footsteps or voices. Nothing came. Just the hum of machines and the whisper of the building settling. I returned to the papers, flipping through pages until I found a third article. Older, grainier, but with the same uncomfortable echo. A woman excited about a dress, last seen entering a quiet storefront with no listed hours. My chest tightened, not out of fear but out of sadness. These women had been forgotten by most. Their names faded, their cases cold. But they hadn't faded for Theresa. And they hadn't faded for whatever force had carved these marks into my arms. I rubbed my palms together, trying to warm my fingers. They stiffened whenever I focused too long. A reminder that my body was still fragile even if my mind felt sharper than ever. I gathered the newspapers, folding them carefully before standing again. My knees creaked in protest and a dull ache spread through my lower back, but I pushed through it. I walked slowly back toward my room, keeping the papers pressed against my chest like something sacred. On the way, I passed by the nurse's station. The younger nurse looked up from her charting and gave me a tired but kind smile. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly. "Doing a little reading," I murmured, lifting the papers slightly. She nodded, but her eyes lingered on the marks beneath my sleeve. "If you need anything, just press the call button." "I will," I promised. When I reached my room, I closed the door quietly and sat on the bed, spreading the newspapers across my lap. The faces of the missing women stared back at me. Their eyes held a mixture of hope and sorrow. They didn't look like strangers anymore. They looked like pieces of a story I had stepped into without knowing. The marks on my arms warmed again, not painfully this time. More like acknowledgement. I whispered, "I see you." The warmth grew. I reached for my notebook and began writing down each woman's name, their last known location, their description. My handwriting wavered occasionally, but I forced myself to keep going. Every detail mattered. Every clue was a step closer. As I wrote, another image flickered, not as sharp as before but enough to make my breath catch. A doorway. A bell above it. A mannequin in the window wearing a dark dress. And a hand, always a hand, pulling the curtain closed. I placed my notebook beside me, hands trembling from the weight of realization. Theresa hadn't just known these women. She had followed them, or led them, or pushed them toward that place. But the marks weren't showing me everything yet. Only enough to pull me forward. Only enough to keep me looking. only enough to ensure I wouldn't stop. I leaned back, feeling the ache in my bones again, but my chest felt lighter now, anchored by purpose rather than dread. I wasn't imagining patterns. I was following them. Following the women Theresa thought the world had forgotten. But I hadn't forgotten them. And neither had the marks. They were guiding me where those women had gone before. And now, step by step, I was closing the distance between their past and Theresa's secrets were no longer ahead of me. They were circling around me, tightening with every name I wrote, every newspaper clipping I unfolded, every mark on my skin that pulsed like a heartbeat not entirely my own. The papers rustled in my lap as I exhaled, the weight of everything pressing down on me. For a moment I simply sat there, letting the quiet of the room sink into my bones. But purpose has a strange way of stirring movement inside an old body. Even tired muscles respond when the heart knows what must come next. I folded the papers gently, set them aside, and slid the notebook under my pillow as though hiding it from the night air itself. The marks along my arms warmed, not fiercely but like encouragement. A reminder. A nudge. I whispered into the dim room, "I know what I have to do next." The words came out steadier than I felt. My throat ached from dryness again, and my hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the blanket. I knew I wasn't strong, not physically. Not in the way years ago I might have been. But strength takes different forms at 68. Mine had turned into something quieter, something sharper. The dress. The one she thought had chosen me. The one I knew now had chosen her all along. I reached for the drawer beside the bed, pulling it open slowly, careful not to disturb the bruising along my ribs. Inside lay the hospital bag my neighbor had brought when she dropped off my things. A simple canvas tote, faded from years of use. I tugged it onto the bed, the fabric whispering across the blanket. My fingers found the wrapped box inside. Not wrapped in paper, wrapped in a folded sweater I had been wearing the day everything began. The sweater still smelled faintly like lavender detergent, but beneath that scent was something else. Something metallic, cold, and unsettling. The same scent that clung to Theresa. I unfolded the sweater slowly, revealing the dress inside. Even in the dim light, the fabric seemed to pull the shadows toward it, as though absorbing anything it touched. The color, a deep charcoal, darker than I remembered, held a texture that made my fingertips tingle just from brushing it. The marks on my arms pulsed in response. I swallowed hard, my heart knocking unevenly against my ribs. This wasn't fear. It was recognition. Still, my hands shook as I lifted the dress. The fabric draped over my fingers in a way that felt alive. Not moving, nothing dramatic, but carrying a weight that was not simply physical. A kind of presence. The same kind I'd felt when the visions came. "You're not mine," I whispered to it. "You never were." The fabric warmed briefly as if acknowledging the truth. A knock startled me. I almost dropped the dress. "Mrs. Larson?" The young nurse's voice drifted through the door. "Can I check your vitals?" I scrambled, slowly, carefully, but with urgency, folding the dress back into the sweater and sliding it under the blanket. My joints protested, but I managed to shove it just out of sight before the door cracked open. The nurse stepped in, carrying her small tray of equipment. Her hair was pulled back tighter than before, and the soft circles under her eyes looked deeper. "Sorry to bother you. I know it's late." "It's all right," I said, forcing calm into my voice. She wrapped the cuff around my arm, pausing when her fingertips brushed one of the raised marks. They pulsed faintly beneath her touch. She frowned but didn't ask. As she noted my vitals, she said quietly, "You seem more awake tonight." "Just reading," I replied. "About those women?" she asked gently, glancing toward the newspapers. Her question caught me off guard. "You saw the articles?" "I saw you carrying them earlier," she said. "Is everything okay?" "No, nothing was okay. But older women learn early that not every truth is meant for every ear." So I offered a careful smile. "I just needed something to keep my mind busy." He hesitated, then nodded. "If you need help with anything, please let me know." Her sincerity warmed something inside me. But sincerity can't solve what I had to face next. When she left, I waited until her footsteps faded before pulling the dress from beneath the blanket. The moment it touched the air, the marks along my arms warmed again, this time sharper, like the tug of a memory I hadn't fully earned yet. I couldn't stay here. Not with the dress. Not with the marks growing impatient. And certainly not with Theresa still believing she controlled the narrative. My bones creaked in protest as I dressed in the clothes folded neatly in the tote bag. Simple slacks, a soft blouse. Comfortable things meant for recovery, not confrontation. But that didn't matter. Clothing does not determine resolve. My legs trembled as I stood, steadying myself with the nightstand. The room swayed slightly, but the marks pulsed again, quicker this time, as if urging me toward something. I slid the dress into the tote bag wrapped tightly. The weight tugged at my shoulder, heavier than a piece of fabric should be. I knew it wasn't only the dress I carried. It was every woman the marks had shown me. Every memory left unfinished. Every truth buried for too long. I cracked the door open. The hallway glowed softly under low night lights. Nurses charted quietly at the far station. Wheels squeaked somewhere behind me. The scent of disinfectant hung in the air, layered with something faintly sweet from a nearby room, maybe a bouquet of flowers left by a hopeful relative. I stepped into the corridor, one slow foot in front of the other, moving toward the elevator. My palm pressed the button and the light flicked on with a soft chime. As I waited, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I gripped the rail along the wall, steadying myself. The marks pulsed again, this time stronger, sharper, like pushing through my skin. I drew in a shaky breath. "I know," I whispered to them. "I'm going." When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The descent felt long. Too long. The fluorescent lights flickered above me. Not harshly, just enough for the air to prickle around me. At the lobby, a security guard glanced over from his desk. He was middle-aged, kind eyes, the type who didn't like confrontation. "Heading out?" he asked. I tightened my grip on the tote. "Just some fresh air." He nodded. "Stay close to the entrance, ma'am." I walked through the automatic doors and into the cool night air. The cold struck my skin immediately, refreshing and sharp. A breeze rustled the nearby trees, carrying a faint scent of pine. The parking lot lights glowed in soft halos. And then I saw her. Theresa. Standing unsheltered near a lamppost, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as though trying to hold her nerves in place. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "What are you doing out here?" she demanded, stepping forward. Her voice wavered. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I walked toward her, each step measured but unwavering. I could feel the marks on my arms warming, responding to her presence. The tote felt like an anchor pulling me toward a moment I could no longer delay. She looked from my face to the tote bag. "What is that?" "Something you left unfinished," I said. Her breath hitched. He took a step back. Her fingers curled around the ends of her sleeves as though trying to hide something beneath them. But I had already seen enough. "You didn't give this to me," I said quietly. "It never belonged to me." She shook her head, her voice cracking. "You shouldn't have taken it." "I didn't take it," I replied. "It came to me." Her knees seemed to weaken. She reached for the lamppost, steadying herself. Her breath came out in short, unsteady bursts. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered. "I know enough." Her eyes filled with something, fear, regret, realization, I couldn't tell. But I didn't need to. I stepped closer and placed the dress into her trembling hands. The moment her fingers touched the fabric, the marks on my arms burned, not painfully but like a release. A loosening. A shifting. She tried to drop the dress. She couldn't. Her hands clung to it involuntarily, her eyes widening in terror as the fabric tightened slightly under her grip. "Please," she choked out, her voice barely sound. But I didn't move. The wind lifted slightly, stirring the hem of the dress. The lamppost flickered. The night around us thickened. Her arms trembled violently. She clutched the dress against her chest as though being pulled toward it. And then, her sleeves shifted, revealing the marks beginning to bloom across her skin. Dark, twisting, flaming. She gasped, stumbling back. I stood still, my breath steady, my heart strangely calm. The dress had chosen. The marks had spoken. And the night held its breath as the curse found its rightful place. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet. The night around us held its breath, as if even the wind refused to interfere with what was unfolding between us. Theresa staggered backward, clutching the dress as though it had fused itself to her palms. Her eyes widened in horror, reflecting the shifting shadows cast by the trembling lamppost overhead. For a long moment neither of us spoke. There was only the sound of her uneven breathing as she tried, and failed, to pry her fingers free from the fabric. The marks on her arms, once hidden beneath her sleeves, now bloomed in dark spirals that twisted upward in frantic lines. Each new mark pulsed, rising beneath her skin like a truth pushing its way to the surface. What is happening?" she gasped, her voice cracking under the weight of panic. I didn't move toward her. I didn't have to. My body felt strangely light, the ache that had settled in my bones for days loosening with each frantic movement she made. The marks on my own arms had calmed, their heat dissolving into a soft, fading warmth. For the first time since this began, I felt my breath expanding fully in my chest, steady and clear. "It's choosing you," I said softly, watching her eyes fill with dread. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't supposed to be me." She tried to shake the dress loose, and when that didn't work, she clawed at her sleeves as if to tear the marks from her skin. But the lines only deepened, darkening into shapes that twisted in ways no natural bruise ever could. Her breath came in short, frantic bursts. "You don't understand," she said, stumbling toward me. "You weren't meant to." "I understand enough," I interrupted, lifting my chin. Her steps slowed. She blinked at me as though seeing me clearly for the first time. As though finally realizing that the woman she had expected to fade away in a hospital bed was not the woman standing before her now. A gust of wind swept through the parking lot, rustling the trees, making the lamppost flicker again. The shadows danced across Theresa's face, highlighting every frantic tremor, every line of terror. "I helped them," she said suddenly, her voice trembling. "Those women. I helped them before anything happened. You have to believe that." The words cracked with desperation, but something inside me stayed firm. Anchored by what I had seen, what the marks had shown me, what the visions had burned into my mind. "You helped them disappear," I replied. Her knees buckled and she fell backward onto the ground, the dress draping across her knees like a dark veil. The fabric shifted slightly, almost breathing with her. Her hands trembled violently. "You don't know what that place was," she said, her voice thin and desperate. "You don't know what they came there for." "Then tell me," I said, folding my arms. "Tell me why their faces appeared to me. Tell me why the marks recognized you." She looked up at me, eyes glossy with fear and something else. Something like resignation. "They came to me," she whispered. "Every one of them. They came because they wanted something fixed. Something hidden. Something forgotten." The words twisted through me, stirring a mix of confusion and anger. "What does that even mean?" "They all had secrets," she said, shaking her head frantically. "Mistakes they couldn't undo. And the dress. The dress wasn't meant to punish them. It was meant to." Her breath hitched as the marks along her collarbone flared. She cried out, grasping at her throat. "Meant to what?" I demanded, stepping closer. She looked up, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Meant to absolve them," she gasped. "It took their guilt away. It freed them." My heart clenched at the tremor in her voice. "Then why did they vanish?" Her eyes darted away. "Because sometimes guilt isn't what the dress finds. Sometimes it finds something darker. Something they hid even from themselves." "Like what?" She swallowed hard. "The truth." Another mark twisted up her neck and she let out a strangled cry. "I tried to help them," she said. "I thought I was helping. I didn't know what it fed on until it was too late." "And what does it feed on, Theresa?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Intent." The words slid through the air like a cold blade. My throat tightened. My mind flashed with the visions. The hallway, the kitchen, the trembling hands washing a dress. The fear in the women's eyes. The way the marks had warmed each time I learned something closer to the truth. "Those women didn't come with guilt," I said slowly. "They came with fear." Theresa nodded, shaking uncontrollably. "Fear becomes intent when it grows strong enough. And the dress, it reacts. It takes what it's given." "And what did you give it?" Her breath stilled. The wind died. The entire world seemed to pause around us. Finally, she whispered, "I gave it them." The words shattered the last fragile thread of doubt inside me. She had guided them there. Pushed them toward it. Watched their fear grow enough to feed something she didn't understand, or pretended not to. My chest tightened with a wave of grief for women I had never known but had felt in every burning mark across my skin. Theresa bowed her head, sobs shaking her shoulders. The dress in her lap pulsed, tightening its grip around her fingers. I didn't mean for it to take them, she whispered. I thought it would stop once it had enough. Enough of what? She lifted her tear-streaked face. Enough secrets. Her answer settled into me with a cold finality. I took a step back, the weight of everything pressing deeply into my chest. The nurses' distant voices drifted faintly through the glass doors of the hospital. The light above us hummed softly. Theresa's breathing grew labored, each inhale shuddering like a plea. The marks had spread down her arms now, spiraling like vines. One line branched across her collarbone, another cutting across her forearm. It wasn't supposed to choose me, she said. I wasn't supposed to. Her breath suddenly caught as a new mark burned across her wrist, glowing faintly before settling into her skin. And then I realized something. The marks weren't just revealing her secrets. They were writing them. Every hidden intent, every lie, every woman she ushered toward that dress, etched onto her skin in a language only truth could carve. I stepped closer, knees trembling but steady enough to hold me. Theresa looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fury and pleading. Help me, she begged. Please. I lowered myself slowly, the ache in my joints flaring. Even then I met her gaze without wavering. You took their fear, I said softly. Now it's taking yours. She shook her head violently, tears spilling across her cheeks. I didn't kill them. No, I said. But you led them to what did. Silence settled between us. A heavy, suffocating silence filled with everything she'd never dared say. The dress tightened along her lap as though pulling her downward. Her marks flared once more and she cried out, collapsing onto her side. Under the flickering lamppost, her skin became a canvas of confessions. Every line, every spiral, every burning symbol whispered the truth she fought to bury. It was no longer a curse. It was her story being written in the only language she could no longer hide from. A security guard rushed toward us, shouting something I couldn't hear over the pounding in my ears. Nurses followed from inside, their faces tight with alarm. As they reached Theresa, she curled into herself, her arms wrapped around the dress, her voice broken and incoherent. But the marks told the story for her. They didn't need translation. A nurse kneeled beside me. Ma'am, are you all right? I nodded slowly. I'm free. The words felt strange on my tongue, soft, unfamiliar but deeply true. Another nurse helped me stand, her hand warm and steady on my elbow. Let's get you inside. As they guided me through the automatic doors, I glanced back at Theresa one last time. Her body trembled under the weight of everything she had hidden for decades. The dress lay tangled around her, no longer absorbing the shadows but revealing them. Her secrets. Her choices. Her truth. Her body had become her confession. Inside the hospital the lights felt warmer. The air felt lighter. The marks on my arms had faded completely, leaving only faint impressions like memories settling into peace. I breathed deeply. For the first time since this began, the air didn't burn in my lungs. I walked forward slowly, each step steadier than the last. I had followed the women she thought the world forgot. I had faced the truth she buried. And now I had my freedom. Because in the end, justice didn't arrive in a courtroom. It arrived in the night, under a trembling lamppost, written in the one place she couldn't escape. Her own skin. And as I stepped farther into the warm hospital light, I carried only one sentence with me. Simple, quiet, and final. I survived, and she finally faced what she ran from. If this story touched something inside you, stay with me. I share stories for women who've lived, lost, loved, and risen again. Subscribe for more powerful emotional journeys.